There is an animal alive on Earth right now that has already survived 5 mass extinctions. It was here before the dinosaurs. It will almost certainly be here long after us. And the most unsettling part, it is smaller than the period at the end of this sentence. Welcome to Wild World Explorer, the channel where we go beyond the surface of nature and find the stories that genuinely shake you. Today we are talking about the tardigrade, the only animal on this planet that seems to have been built for the end of the world. Not adapted for it, not just lucky, built for it, and by the time this video is over, you will understand why some scientists lose sleep thinking about what this tiny creature actually means for life. Death and everything in between. Picture this: a volcanic ocean vent on the seafloor boiling hot. Crushing pressure, total darkness. Then imagine the frozen vacuum of outer space, where temperatures drop to nearly minus 270 degrees, and there is no air, no water. No protection from radiation. Now imagine the epicenter of a nuclear blast zone years after the explosion. Soil still laced with radiation that would kill a human in minutes. The tardigrade has survived all of those places. Not in theory, in actual scientific experiments. Real labs, real results, now meet it properly. Its official scientific name is Rhizodius variornatus, and it belongs to the phylum Tardigrade. A name that comes from Latin and roughly translates to slow walker. Scientists first spotted this creature in 1773, when a German pastor named Johann August Ephraim Goes pressed a wet piece of moss under a lens and saw something that looked like a tiny bear shuffling around with 8 stubby legs. He called it the little water bear, and that nickname stuck because once you see one, you cannot call it anything else. There are over 1,300 known species of tardigrades spread across every corner of the planet. But Rhizodius variornatus is the one scientists keep coming back to, because this particular species has broken almost every rule biology thought it understood about what life can and cannot do. And we are just getting started, so we know what it is called, but where does it actually belong in the story of life on Earth? That question turns out to be more complicated than anyone expected. When scientists first tried to sort the tardigrade into the family tree of animals, they ran into a wall. It has 8 legs, which made people think it was related to spiders and insects. It has claws, which pointed toward arthropods, the giant group that includes crabs, beetles, and centipedes. But then they looked closer, and things started getting strange. The tardigrade has muscles that work differently from arthropods. Its nervous system is laid out in a way that does not quite match any other group. Its mouth is unlike anything else in the animal kingdom. So scientists had to create an entirely separate phylum just for it. A phylum is one of the biggest categories in biology. Think of it like this: all mammals are in one phylum, all insects and crabs share another. The tardigrade gets its own. That is how different it is. Tardigrade, the phylum it belongs to, sits in a broader cluster of animals that scientists call ecdysozoa. These are animals that shed their outer layer as they grow. Insects do it, snakes do it in a way, and tardigrades do it too, molting their outer cuticle as they develop. That shared trait links them distantly to roundworms and arthropods. But only distantly. They branched off on their own path hundreds of millions of years ago and never looked back. Here is the part that really gets scientists talking. When researchers sequenced the tardigrade genome, they found something that should not be there. About 17% of its genetic material appeared to come from completely different organisms. Things like bacteria, fungi, and even plants. That is an absurdly high number. In humans, that figure is less than 1%. What this means is that over millions of years, the tardigrade has been quietly collecting genetic tools from other life forms, absorbing their survival tricks at the most fundamental level possible. Some scientists call this horizontal gene transfer. Others call it something closer to biological theft. Either way, the tardigrade has been building itself into something stronger for a very, very long time, and when you understand where it lives, you will see exactly why it needed to. Now here is the thing that will genuinely surprise you. The tardigrade does not live in some remote, unreachable corner of the world. It does not hide deep in the Amazon or at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Somewhere humans will never go. It lives right next to you, right now, probably within walking distance of wherever you are sitting. Step outside and find a patch of moss on an old wall, a wet rock, or the bark of a tree. Pick up a small piece of it. That clump of green, wet, ordinary moss that nobody ever looks at twice. That is almost certainly a tardigrade neighborhood. Squeeze it gently into a drop of water, put it under a microscope, and within seconds you will see them. Dozens of tiny water bears shuffling around, completely unbothered, living their best lives in a world too small for us to see. Tardigrades have been found on every single continent on Earth. Antarctica, where temperatures drop low enough to freeze metal. The scalding, mineral-rich waters near hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. The top of the Himalayas, where the air is thin and the cold is brutal. And the middle of tropical rainforests where heat and humidity press down like a wet blanket. It does not matter, they are there. Scientists have also found them in sand on beaches, in the soil of your backyard garden, in the gutters of city buildings, and floating in freshwater lakes. One study collected samples from a rooftop in Japan and found hundreds of tardigrades living in a thin crust of dried algae. Doing absolutely nothing, waiting patiently for rain, that last detail matters. The tardigrade is not really tied to a specific habitat the way most animals are. It is tied to water. But only barely. As long as there is even a thin film of moisture around its body, it can function. And when that moisture disappears, it simply stops functioning and waits, for years, possibly decades. This ability to be everywhere and survive anywhere is not an accident. It is the result of hundreds of millions of years of refinement. And to understand how it actually works, you need to look at the tardigrade itself up close. Because this creature is unlike anything else you have ever seen. So what does it actually look like? This creature that lives everywhere and fears nothing, under a microscope. The tardigrade looks like something a child drew from memory after being told to imagine an animal. It has a short, plump, barrel-shaped body. It has 8 stubby legs, each one tipped with tiny claws that grip surfaces like little grappling hooks. Its skin is translucent, which means you can sometimes see right through it, watching its organs working in real time. It is between 0.5 millimeter and 1.5 millimeters long, smaller than the tip of a sharpened pencil. Its face is the strangest part. It has no real eyes the way you and I do. It has simple light sensing spots on either side of its head. Dark little dots that can detect brightness and shadow but cannot form images. It does not need to see the world clearly. It just needs to know whether the light is on or off, and then there is the mouth. The tardigrade has a circular tube-like mouth called a stylet, which works like a hollow needle. It uses this to pierce the cells of algae, moss, and bacteria, then sucks out the liquid inside. Some species use the same mouth to hunt other tardigrades. Yes, they eat each other. The microscopic world is not a friendly place. But none of that is what makes the tardigrade genuinely extraordinary. What makes it extraordinary is what happens inside its body when things go wrong, when the environment becomes too dry, too hot, too cold, or too toxic. The tardigrade does something no other animal can do as completely or as reliably. It pulls all 8 of its legs inward, contracts its entire body into a tiny oval shape, and essentially shuts itself off. Scientists call this state cryptobiosis, which means hidden life. From the outside, it just looks like a dried up speck of dust, but inside something remarkable is happening. The tardigrade replaces almost all the water in its cells with a special sugar called trehalose. This sugar forms a glass-like shield around every single molecule in its body, protecting its proteins, its membranes, and its genetic material from collapsing or getting damaged. Everything pauses: the heartbeat, the digestion, the aging process itself. It is not sleeping, it is not dead. It is something in between that science still does not have a perfect word for. Now here is something that might seem obvious at first, but turns out to be one of the deepest mysteries about this creature. The tardigrade lives everywhere. Thousands of them can share the same patch of moss. They brush past each other constantly. They eat from the same food sources, sometimes in the same moment. And yet, as far as scientists can tell, they pay almost no attention to each other at all. The tardigrade is profoundly solitary, not in a dramatic, lonely way. More like it simply does not register other tardigrades as relevant. No social hierarchy, no territories to defend, no bonding, no grooming, no group decisions. Every single one just moves through its tiny wet world as if the others are part of the furniture. But that raises a question scientists have been quietly wrestling with. If they do not communicate, how do they coordinate reproduction? How does a male tardigrade find a female when it has no voice, no visible signals, and eyes that cannot form images? The honest answer is that we do not fully know. What researchers have observed is that some species leave chemical traces in the water film around them. A kind of invisible signature that other tardigrades can detect through sensory cells near their mouths. Whether this counts as communication or is just an accidental chemical trail, nobody is certain. It is one of those questions that sounds simple, but opens into something much harder the more you look at it. What we do know is that when two tardigrades find each other, the interaction is brief and businesslike. There is no courtship display, no ritual. In many species, the male deposits a packet of genetic material near the female and leaves. In some species, the female does not even need a male at all. She simply produces eggs on her own, copies of herself. Ready to face whatever the world throws at them, there is something almost philosophical about that. An animal with no real social life, no language, no relationships, just pure individual existence. And yet it has outlasted nearly everything that ever tried to build something more complex. You have to wonder whether being alone is not a weakness at all, but the oldest and most reliable survival strategy on the planet. And when you look at how the tardigrade reproduces and raises its young, that feeling only gets stronger. The tardigrade does not raise its young. It does not protect them, guide them, or teach them anything. And somehow that turns out to be completely fine when a female tardigrade is ready to reproduce. She lays between 1 and 30 eggs at a time. Some species lay their eggs inside the shed outer skin from their last molt, which acts like a natural protective casing. The eggs are tough, incredibly tough. They can survive drying out, freezing, and even mild radiation exposure while still developing normally inside. The young that hatch from those eggs are not helpless babies. They come out as miniature adults already equipped with claws, a stylet mouth, and every biological tool they will ever need. Nobody teaches them how to feed. Nobody shows them where to go. They simply start living, immediately and independently, as if they were born already knowing everything. A tardigrade lives for around 2 to 3 years under normal conditions, but here is where the numbers get strange. Those 2 to 3 years are active years, years when the animal is actually awake, moving, eating. And aging, the time spent in cryptobiosis, that glass-like suspended state, does not count. The body is paused. The clock is paused with it. So a tardigrade that spends decades in and out of cryptobiosis could technically persist for much longer than its biological lifespan would suggest. Scientists have revived tardigrades that were dried and frozen in museum samples for over 100 years. One team in Japan successfully woke up a specimen that had been frozen in Antarctic ice for 30 years. It came back, started moving, started eating, and eventually laid eggs that hatched successfully. 30 years of nothing. And then just alive again. The threats to a tardigrade's life are remarkably few. Prolonged heat above 150 degrees can kill them. Sustained exposure to certain chemicals can overwhelm even their defenses. And other tardigrades, as mentioned, will sometimes eat them, but compared to the list of things that cannot kill them, the list of things that can is embarrassingly short. This is a creature that has faced asteroid impacts, ice ages, and the collapse of entire ecosystems, and it just kept going. No drama, no adaptation scramble. It simply waited, and the world eventually became livable again. But even with all of that on the record, there are things about the tardigrade that science still cannot explain. Here is where the story stops being just biology and starts becoming something harder to categorize. In April of 2019, an Israeli spacecraft called Bereshit Crash landed on the surface of the moon. The mission failed. The lander hit the lunar surface at high speed and broke apart. But tucked inside that spacecraft was a small payload that included thousands of dehydrated tardigrades, sealed in a sample and sent along as part of an experiment. When the craft crashed, nobody knows exactly what happened to them. The container may have survived the impact, the tardigrades inside already in their dried glass. Like state may still be sitting on the moon right now, technically intact, waiting for moisture that will never come. No one has gone back to check. And that thought sits in the back of the scientific community like an unanswered question nobody is in a hurry to resolve. Then there is the debate that has been quietly heating up in research circles for years. The 17% foreign genetic material discovered in the tardigrade genome did not just raise eyebrows. It triggered a serious argument. One group of scientists proposed that this level of genetic borrowing from outside sources was so extreme, so far beyond what any other known animal has done, that it pointed towards something unusual about the tardigrade's origins. A few researchers went further and floated the idea that some of its genetic material could theoretically trace back to non-Earth sources carried here on asteroids or comets during the early bombardment of our solar system. Billions of years ago, this idea called panspermia is not mainstream. Most scientists are skeptical. But it has not been fully ruled out either. What makes this debate genuinely interesting is that the tardigrade is the only animal where this conversation is even remotely plausible. Every other animal's genome fits neatly within the story of Earth. The tardigrade's does not entirely. And then there is the question that no researcher has managed to answer cleanly: if cryptobiosis fully suspends biological time. And if a tardigrade can be revived after 100 years or more, is there a theoretical upper limit to how long it could persist? Nobody knows. The experiments have not gone long enough, or perhaps they have and nobody has thought to check the oldest samples yet. Some questions are scarier when the answer might actually be no. There is no limit at all. So where does all of this leave the tardigrade today? The strange answer is in better shape than almost anything else on Earth. While conservationists work around the clock to protect elephants, tigers, and coral reefs, nobody is running a campaign to save the tardigrade. It does not need one. Its population is not declining. It is not on any endangered species list. It is not threatened by deforestation, ocean acidification, or rising temperatures in any meaningful way. The very forces that are dismantling ecosystems across the planet barely register for a creature that has already survived far worse. And yet that is not entirely reassuring, because the tardigrade's resilience is not a sign that everything is fine. It is almost the opposite. When scientists talk about which species will survive the changes humans are making to this planet, the tardigrade comes up not as a symbol of hope but as a kind of benchmark, a baseline. The minimum that will remain when everything more fragile is gone. Think about that for a moment. We are building a world where the most complex, most beautiful, most interconnected living systems are being stripped away. And what will be left, thriving quietly in the ruins, is a microscopic animal that does not need any of them. The tardigrade does not need forests, it does not need clean oceans, it does not need a stable climate. It just needs a thin film of water and a little time, and it has proven over 500 million years that it can always find both. What does that say about the path we are on? Scientists studying the tardigrade are not just curious about it as a curiosity, they are studying its proteins, its genetic repair mechanisms, and its cryptobiosis chemistry, because the answers inside this tiny creature could one day help preserve human cells during surgery, protect seeds from drought, or even extend the shelf life of life-saving medicines. The tardigrade may be the most useful animal we have barely begun to understand. It arrived before us. It will leave after us. It asks nothing from the world and loses nothing when the world falls apart. Maybe the most humbling thing about the tardigrade is not how tough it is how quietly it has watched everything else come and go. Thank you for watching this episode of Wild World Explorer. If this story made you think differently about the smallest things around you, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories like this one waiting for you here.